Walk into any British off-licence and you'll find an entire wall of cider promising crisp apples and countryside charm. But half of them taste like alcoholic apple juice, gone wrong, mixed with regret and a splitting headache. We're exposing the 15 worst UK cider brands that are absolutely not worth your money, and some of these beloved names might genuinely shock you. Let's get into it. Diamond White is super strength cider that was massive in the 90s when getting absolutely hammered on cheap booze was considered a good Friday night. But it's always been absolutely terrible, and it's still terrible now, just with better marketing. This stuff is 7.5% alcohol and tastes like someone mixed cheap white cider with lemonade and chemical apple flavouring, then added enough sugar to make it barely drinkable. The result is sickly sweet, aggressively fizzy, and has that distinctive super strength harshness that burns your throat and promises a horrible hangover. The apple flavour is artificial and unpleasant. The sweetness is cloying rather than refreshing. And the whole thing just tastes cheap in every possible way. Cheap ingredients, cheap production, cheap everything except the headache it gives you the next morning. Diamond White was marketed to young people who wanted to get drunk quickly and cheaply, and it succeeded at that. But it's absolutely not something anyone should be drinking if they actually care about what cider tastes like or how they feel the next day. Britain's moved on from super strength alcopops pretending to be cider, and Diamond White should have been left in the 90s where it belongs. Frosty Jacks is what happens when someone decides to make the cheapest possible cider without any concern for whether it's actually drinkable. And the result is 3 litres of headache juice that cost less than a decent pint at the pub. This stuff tastes like someone dissolved sugar in white vinegar, added a hint of apple flavouring from a chemical lab, and called it cider. It's got that distinctive, harsh, alcoholic burn that has nothing to do with apples, and everything to do with industrial fermentation gone wrong. The sweetness is cloying and artificial. The apple flavour is virtually non-existent, and the morning after drinking Frosty Jacks is legendary for all the wrong reasons, because whatever's in that plastic bottle is designed for getting drunk cheaply rather than enjoying cider. It's what students buy when they're skint, and teenagers hide in the park, and there's a reason nobody over 25 touches the stuff unless they've given up on life entirely. Because Frosty Jacks isn't cider, it's just cheap alcohol pretending to be cider, and Britain deserves better than this. A chemistry set, because budget cider like Saxon isn't saving you money, it's just wasting the money you did spend on something that doesn't even taste nice. White Star cider sits in corner shops and budget off-licenses in those big plastic bottles that scream, "We're cheap and we don't care." And one sip tells you everything you need to know about why it costs so little. The taste is aggressively sweet, with that artificial apple flavour that reminds you of those cheap apple-flavoured sweets you got as a kid, except somehow less pleasant, and with a chemical aftertaste that lingers for hours. It's got that harsh alcohol bite that burns your throat going down, and the sweetness doesn't mask the poor quality. It just makes everything worse by adding sugar to already terrible cider. White Star is marketed as value cider, but there's value, and there's this, and this is just depressing. The kind of cider that makes you question your life choices halfway through the first glass. The only people buying White Star are doing it because they're absolutely skint, or they genuinely don't care what cider tastes like as long as it's got alcohol in it. And that's not a ringing endorsement for something you're meant to enjoy drinking. Woodpecker cider has been around forever with that distinctive label, but longevity doesn't equal quality, and this stuff has always been disappointingly average mass-produced cider that tastes more like sweet fizzy apple juice than actual cider. It's aggressively sweet with artificial flavouring that doesn't taste like real apples, more like someone's idea of what apple flavour should be, based on sweets and cordial rather than actual fruit from orchards. The carbonation is excessive and makes it feel more like drinking lemonade than cider, and the whole thing is just thin and unsatisfying with no depth or character. It's completely forgettable except for being disappointing. Woodpecker positions itself as traditional British cider, trading on decades of brand recognition, but it's been overtaken by literally dozens of better options at similar prices that actually taste like they're made from apples rather than a factory. The alcohol content is standard, but the taste is so sweet and artificial that you're basically drinking alcoholic apple pop, and that's not what cider should be. Cider should taste like apples, have some complexity, and be refreshing rather than sickly. Woodpecker fails on all counts and survives purely on people buying it out of habit or nostalgia, rather than because it's actually any good. Cider is legendary in Britain for being absolutely brutal. It's super strength cider that hits 8.4% and tastes like liquid regret mixed with budget apple juice and bad decisions. This stuff is harsh, aggressively alcoholic, and has that distinctive super strength cider taste that's less about apples and more about getting absolutely plastered as quickly and cheaply as possible. The apple flavour is barely there, buried under the overwhelming alcohol taste and artificial sweetness, and drinking cider is less an enjoyable experience and more a test of endurance. How much of this can you get down before your taste buds surrender? It's got that syrupy thickness that coats your mouth unpleasantly, and the morning after cider is genuinely horrible, because this stuff is designed for one purpose, and that purpose isn't sophisticated cider appreciation. The only people buying cider are doing it deliberately for the alcohol content, not because they think it tastes nice, and that tells you everything you need to know about the quality. This is functional drinking rather than enjoyable drinking, and life's too short for cider that feels like punishment. Blackthornne used to be everywhere in British pubs back in the day, but it's always been mediocre, mass-produced cider that tastes like they've diluted actual cider with water and artificial flavouring until it's barely cider anymore. It's got that thin, watery texture that slides down too easily because there's nothing substantial there. And the taste is vaguely apple-ish, but mostly just sweet and forgettable, with a chemical aftertaste that lingers unpleasantly. Blackthornne positions itself as traditional British cider, but there's nothing traditional about this factory-made stuff that bears no resemblance to proper West Country cider made in Somerset orchards. It's industrial cider made as cheaply as possible and sold on brand recognition rather than quality. The carbonation is excessive and fizzy, like lemonade, rather than the gentle sparkle proper cider should have, and the whole experience is just disappointing from start to finish. There are so many better ciders available now at similar prices that buying Blackthornne feels like settling for mediocrity out of habit rather than actually choosing something you'll enjoy, and British cider deserves better than this watered-down mass-market rubbish. If you're shocked we've just destroyed some cider brands you've been drinking for years, or nodding along because you've always known they were rubbish, smash that like button, drop a comment telling us which ciders we've got wrong, and subscribe because we've got 9 more terrible ciders to expose and you won't want to miss them. Lambrini technically isn't cider, it's perry made from pears, but it's marketed alongside cider and people buy it thinking it's similar, so it deserves inclusion for being spectacularly awful perry that's given perry a bad name for decades. This stuff is sickly sweet, alcoholic pear-flavoured fizzy wine that tastes like someone dissolved pear drops in cheap Prosecco, added chemical sweeteners, and decided that was close enough to perry to sell it. The sweetness is absolutely overwhelming and artificial. The pear flavour tastes nothing like actual pears, and the whole thing is just cheap and nasty, with excessive carbonation and that distinctive alcopop quality that makes it popular with people who don't actually like the taste of alcohol. Lambrini was marketed to women with ridiculous sexist advertising about girls' nights and being cheeky and fun. But what they're actually selling is cheap booze dressed up as something sophisticated when it's anything but. Real perry made from proper perry pears in Herefordshire. And Gloucestershire is absolutely beautiful. Complex, delicate, genuinely special. And Lambrini is an insult to that heritage, being mass-produced rubbish that's turned perry into a joke. If you want perry, buy proper perry from craft producers who actually care. Don't buy this sugary alcopop nonsense that's ruined perry's reputation. Kopparberg exploded in British pubs over the last 15 years with their fruit ciders that come in pretty bottles and taste like alcoholic fruit juice. But their mixed fruit flavour is absolutely terrible, a confused mess of artificial fruit flavours that don't work together and don't taste remotely like actual fruit. This stuff is trying to be strawberry and lime cider, but what it actually tastes like is artificial fruit candy dissolved in mediocre cider with so much sugar added that your teeth ache after half a bottle. Kopparberg is Swedish rather than British, which isn't automatically bad, But they've taken the worst aspects of alcopops and fruit ciders and combined them into something that's neither good cider nor good fruit drink. Just sickly sweet confusion that's more about marketing and pretty packaging than actual taste. The artificial flavouring is overwhelming and chemical tasting. The sweetness is absolutely excessive, and the cider base is so bland and characterless that they clearly just use it as a vehicle for fruit flavouring rather than caring about cider quality. Mixed fruit is the worst of Kopparberg's range because at least their single fruit flavours have focus. This one is just throwing flavours at the wall and hoping something sticks, and the result is a confused mess that tastes like someone emptied several fruit cordials into cheap cider. Weston's is actually a proper cider company with a genuine heritage making real cider in Herefordshire. But their Mortimers Orchard range is a disappointing budget line that's clearly designed to compete with mass market brands on price, rather than maintaining Weston's usual quality standards. This stuff is thin and oversweet, with that mass market blandness that Weston's premium ranges completely avoid. It tastes like they've watered down their good cider and added sugar to hide the lack of character, creating something that's technically better than Frosty Jacks but not actually nice. The apple flavour is weak and artificial tasting, despite Weston's having access to proper Herefordshire cider apples, and the whole thing just feels like a compromise. Weston's trying to make cheap cider for supermarkets and sacrificing everything that makes their proper cider good. It's disappointing because Weston's can make brilliant cider. Their Vintage and Old Rosie are genuinely excellent traditional ciders, but Mortimer's Orchard feels like they've sold out and made something bland and commercial to chase market share. If you're buying Weston's, skip this budget range entirely and spend the extra £1 on their proper cider that actually showcases what they can do. Mortimer's Orchard is just a waste of Weston's good name. Taurus is another super strength budget cider in the same category as Frosty Jacks and White Star, except somehow even worse because at least those are honestly cheap and rubbish. Taurus tries to position itself as slightly better while still being absolutely terrible. This stuff comes in plastic bottles, hits 7.5% alcohol, and tastes like industrial cider mixed with sugar syrup and artificial apple flavouring, with that distinctive harsh chemical taste that all budget super strength ciders share. The sweetness is cloying and artificial, the alcohol burn is aggressive and unpleasant, and the apple flavour is virtually non-existent. It's just cheap booze with enough apple flavouring to technically qualify as cider under British law. Taurus is what you find in corner shops in rough areas, priced to appeal to people who are buying alcohol for the alcohol, rather than because they enjoy drinking. And that's a sad statement about what cider's become in some markets. Britain has an incredible cider heritage, going back centuries, with traditional methods and proper cider apples creating something genuinely special, and Taurus is the complete opposite of that. It's everything wrong with modern budget alcohol, made as cheaply as possible, with no care for tradition, quality, or taste. Nobody should be drinking this stuff. It's not even cheap enough to justify the awfulness, just depressing in every possible way. Old English Cider is another budget super strength nightmare that sits alongside Frosty Jacks and White Stars in the absolutely avoid category. It's cheap, harsh, and tastes like industrial alcohol mixed with apple-flavoured chemicals rather than anything resembling actual cider. The name is deliberately misleading, suggesting traditional British cider heritage, when what you're actually getting is mass-produced budget booze made as cheaply as possible with maximum alcohol and minimum quality. It's got that distinctive super-strength harshness that burns your throat, aggressive artificial sweetness that doesn't mask the poor quality, and barely any apple character at all. Just alcohol and chemicals pretending to be cider. Old English comes in those big plastic bottles that immediately identify it as budget stuff, usually tucked away in corner shops and off licenses, rather than proper supermarkets, because even budget supermarkets won't stock cider this cheap and nasty. The only people buying Old English are doing it because it's the absolute cheapest option available, or because they genuinely don't care what cider tastes like, and that's not a market position any cider should be proud of. Britain deserves better than this. We've got centuries of proper cider making tradition, brilliant craft producers making exceptional stuff, and even decent mass market options that don't taste like punishment. Old English is the bottom of the barrel, and there's absolutely no reason to drink it when literally any other cider would be better. Strongbow Original is probably the most widely available cider in Britain, served in practically every pub and sold in every supermarket. But popularity doesn't equal quality, and this stuff is aggressively mediocre. Mass-produced cider that's completely sacrificed taste for consistency and shelf life. It's thin and watery, with barely any apple flavour, over-carbonated like cheap lemonade, and has that distinctive mass-market blandness where it doesn't taste actively bad, but it doesn't taste of much at all, just vaguely sweet, vaguely apple-ish, completely forgettable. Strongbow has been making cider since the 60s, and they've perfected the art of making something that offends nobody because it tastes of nothing, designed to be drunk ice-cold in massive quantities rather than actually enjoyed or savoured. The apple content is minimal, and whatever apples they use have been processed so heavily that any actual fruit character has been stripped out, leaving you with industrial cider that might as well be made from concentrate and chemicals. Britain produces some of the world's best cider, proper West Country stuff made from actual cider apples in traditional orchards, and Strongbow Original is the complete opposite of that. It's everything wrong with modern mass-market alcohol, prioritising profit margins and mass appeal over quality and taste. Omega Cider is super-strength budget stuff that lurks in corner shops and dodgy off-licenses, hitting 7.5% alcohol and tasting like someone mixed industrial ethanol with apple cordial and called it cider. This stuff is absolutely brutal, harsh, aggressively alcoholic, and so sweet it makes your teeth hurt, with that distinctive, cheap, super-strength taste that has nothing to do with apples and everything to do with getting drunk as quickly and cheaply as possible. The apple flavour is virtually non-existent, buried under chemical sweetness and that burning alcohol taste that hits the back of your throat and doesn't let go, and the whole experience is just unpleasant from start to finish. Not even so bad it's funny, but genuinely grim. Omega comes in those telltale plastic bottles that scream, "We're the cheapest option and we don't care about quality," usually stacked on the bottom shelf where they belong, and the only people reaching for it are either absolutely skint or have completely given up on the idea that cider should actually taste nice. The morning after drinking Omega is legendarily awful, because whatever's in that bottle is designed purely for alcohol content rather than being something you'd actually want to drink, and Britain's cider heritage deserves so much better than this super-strength nightmare that's giving proper cider a terrible reputation. Strongbow Dark Fruit exploded in popularity a few years back because it tastes like alcoholic Ribena and appeals to people who don't actually like cider. But here's the truth. It's absolutely dreadful and has done more damage to British cider's reputation than anything else in recent history. This isn't cider, it's alcopop pretending to be cider, with so much added dark fruit flavouring and sugar that whatever apple content exists is completely buried under berry-flavoured sweetness that tastes like someone melted a packet of blackcurrant pastilles into cheap cider. The artificial fruit flavour is overwhelming and cloying. The sweetness makes your teeth ache, and the whole thing tastes like something designed in a marketing meeting rather than an orchard, which is exactly what it is. Strongbow took their already mediocre cider and made it worse by adding fruit flavouring that tastes nothing like actual berries, creating something that's neither good cider nor good fruit drink, just a sugary mess that gives you a headache and makes proper cider drinkers weep for the state of British brewing. If you want fruit cider, there are dozens of proper craft options made with actual fruit. Don't settle for this flavoured nonsense that's turned cider into something your teenage nephew drinks in the park. Summersby is Danish mass-market cider that appeared in British supermarkets a few years back with flashy marketing and pretty packaging, but strip away the branding and it's just another mediocre mass-produced cider that tastes thin, oversweet and artificial. The apple flavour is weak and chemical tasting. Rather than anything resembling actual apples, the sweetness is excessive and cloying, and the whole thing is over-carbonated and fizzy, like cheap lemonade, rather than proper cider. Summersby positions itself as premium imported cider, but there's nothing premium about this stuff. It's made using concentrate and artificial flavouring, rather than actual apples, and it shows in every sip. The Danish don't have Britain's cider heritage or tradition, and Summersby proves it. This tastes like someone read about cider in a textbook, and made something technically cider without understanding what makes proper cider actually good. It's bland, forgettable, and expensive for what you're getting, trading on imported cachet and marketing, rather than actual quality. Britain makes some of the world's best cider right here in Somerset, Herefordshire, and Devon. Why are we drinking mediocre Danish imports when we've got brilliant stuff made properly in British orchards? Summersby is just another international drinks corporation, making bland mass-market alcohol and hoping British consumers don't notice it's rubbish. That's 15 British cider brands you should absolutely never buy. From super-strength nightmares to mass-market mediocrity, these are the ones to leave on the shelf and never look back. If this helped you avoid terrible cider or made you realise what you've been drinking is actually rubbish, hit that subscribe button and watch the next video on screen where we're ranking something else that'll get everyone talking. Cheers!